At my birthday party, I gave my fiancée a gift. She opened it in front of her friends and said, "This is why I can't wait to upgrade." They all snickered. I just smiled, blew out my candle, and left the cake on the table. A week later, she showed up to a different apartment. "All right, Reddit, I've been a long-time lurker, but the last month of my life has been such a spectacular train wreck that I feel like I owe it to the internet to share the story. The best part? I was the one conducting the train. It all came to a head on my 35th birthday. Now, when I say my birthday, I use the term loosely. It was technically a celebration of the day I was born, but the party itself had very little to do with me. I had pitched the idea of a quiet steak dinner. My fiancée, Sarah, countered with a 50-person cocktail party at our apartment. Our apartment, of course, being the one I paid for. Her friends, of course, being the 50 people. I lost that negotiation, as I often did. The week before the party, she sat me down with the kind of serious look a CEO gives before announcing layoffs. "Babe, we need to talk about your birthday gift," she said. I was confused. "You got me a gift?" I hadn't seen any evidence of this. She laughed, a pretty but completely empty sound. "No, silly, the gift you're getting me." I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. "You want me to buy you a gift? For my birthday?" "Exactly," she said, relieved that I was catching on. "It's not really for me, it's for us, it's for our brand. Tiffany's going to be there, and you know she'll be live streaming the whole thing. I just want to have something shiny to open, to show everyone how amazing you are." I'm not a simp. Let's just get that out of the way. I'm a crisis manager. I work for a large international NGO. When there's an earthquake, a flood, or a political collapse, I'm the guy they send in to make sense of the chaos. I assess unstable situations, I manage logistics in impossible environments, and I make hard, logical decisions when everyone else is panicking. My entire life is about identifying and neutralizing threats to a mission. For the past year, my personal life has been my mission's shore leave. After a particularly brutal stint managing aid distribution in a conflict zone, I came home completely burned out. I met Sarah a few weeks later. She was beautiful, fun, and her biggest problem in life was which brunch spot had the best lighting for Instagram. It was perfect. Our relationship wasn't a passion project. It was a decompression chamber. I knew what she was. She and her friends, led by the perpetually unimpressed Tiffany, were a case study in terminal vapidity. I wasn't investing in a future with her. I was observing a foreign culture while my soul rebooted. I was paying for a front row seat to a very strange, very shallow documentary. So when she asked me to buy her a gift for my birthday, I didn't even argue. I just logged it as another data point. "Okay," I said, "I'll take care of it." The night of the party was exactly as awful as I'd imagined. The apartment was filled with people named Chad and Ashley and Tiffany, all talking loudly about things that didn't matter. I played the part of the gracious host, smiling and nodding while my brain was mentally calculating the supply chain logistics for a hypothetical refugee camp. I hadn't received a single thing from Sarah. No card, no happy birthday, nothing. I was just the guy funding the open bar. Then came the main event. Tiffany, who has the predatory instincts of a cheetah and the intellectual depth of a puddle, got everyone's attention. "Okay, people, time for the moment we've all been waiting for. Sarah's gift." Sarah beamed, shooting me a look that said, "This better be good." I handed her the box. It wasn't the Cartier bracelet she had been leaving open on her browser tabs. Inside was a vintage, first edition copy of The Wind in the Willows. It was the only thing I had from my late mother. It was the most valuable object I owned, not in money, but in meaning. I'd had it professionally restored. Inside I'd written, "For all the adventures we have yet to begin." It was a test, a final one. I wanted to see if there was anything under the surface. She opened it. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second as she stared at the old book. But she was a professional. She held it up for Tiffany's phone. "Oh my God, babe," she said, her voice straining to sound sincere. "A book? It's so thoughtful." Tiffany zoomed in, a confused look on her face. Then Sarah, high on champagne and the attention of 50 of her closest sycophants, made a fatal error. She looked at her friends, let out a little laugh, and said the words that sealed her fate. "It's sweet, but this is exactly why I can't wait to upgrade." Her friends exploded in laughter. It was the punchline to a joke I hadn't realized I was the butt of for the past year. In that moment, the mission brief in my head changed. The decompression was over. The environment had turned hostile. The objective was no longer observation, it was extraction. I just smiled. I walked over to the sad, untouched birthday cake, picked up a single cupcake, and lit the candle. I held it up. "Make a wish," I said to no one in particular. Then I blew it out, set the cupcake down, and walked straight into my home office, closing the door behind me. The crisis had officially begun, and I was now fully activated. Update 1. The first rule of crisis management is to secure your assets and establish a safe operating base. While the party was dying down, I was in my office, executing a full-scale operational withdrawal. Sarah, I assume, thought I was just pouting. She had no idea I was orchestrating a coup against her entire way of life. My primary asset was the apartment. The lease was in my name, a non-negotiable term from the start. A crisis manager never co-signs anything in an unstable region. At 2 a.m., I emailed the landlord. I gave my 30-day notice, CCing my lawyer. I informed him I was vacating immediately, but that the final month's rent was covered. I also stated that the other occupant, Sarah, would be responsible for the final walkthrough and key handover. This simple email transferred the full liability of the apartment and the headache of dealing with her directly to the landlord. Next, I secured my supply lines. I logged into my bank and credit card accounts. Sarah was an authorized user on everything. It took me less than 5 minutes to revoke her access to a small fortune in available credit. I rerouted all my income to a new, secure account. The logistical support for the Sarah project was now officially cut off. I have an emergency bag packed at all times. It's a habit from my line of work. It contains cash, a satellite phone, copies of my documents, and a change of clothes. I grabbed it, along with my work laptop and the book she had discarded on the counter. By 4 a.m., I had extracted myself from the hot zone. I didn't go to a hotel. I went to a small, unassuming apartment I'd leased under my company's name 6 months ago. A good manager always has a fallback position. From this new command center, I moved on to the next phase, dismantling the opposition's infrastructure. Sarah's power base wasn't her own, it was her network, and the queen of that network was Tiffany. Tiffany was a problem. She was an influencer, which is another word for a professional parasite. Her entire existence was a carefully curated lie, funded by a combination of her wealthy parents and a series of scams she ran on small businesses. I knew this because for the past year, I had been treating her as a potential hostile actor. I had done my homework. My job has taught me how to find the cracks in any system. Tiffany's biggest vulnerability was a charity she was promoting. She was raising money for a fake animal shelter, complete with a slick website and heart-wrenching stock photos of sad-looking puppies. It was a classic grift. I spent the next morning putting together a dossier. It was a professional intelligence brief. It contained a full analysis of her fake charity, screenshots of her soliciting donations, and a financial trace I ran that showed the donation link went directly to her personal PayPal account. I also included evidence of her buying tens of thousands of fake followers and the return fraud scheme she was running with Sarah using my credit cards. I didn't post it online. A public attack is messy. A targeted strike is efficient. I sent the dossier from an anonymous encrypted email address to 3 specific targets: an investigative reporter at a local news station who specialized in online scams, the IRS's charity fraud division, and Tiffany's father. With the primary hostile neutralized, I turned to her secondary support units. Her other friends. One of them, a girl named Madison, worked in a junior role at a large investment bank. A job like that requires a rigorous background check and a high level of personal integrity. I did a quick search of her public social media. It was a treasure trove of photos of her at parties, clearly intoxicated and bragging about her wild weekends. I compiled a small, neat package of these public posts and sent it anonymously to her firm's head of compliance, with a simple note: "Is this the public image your company wishes to project?" The final piece was Sarah's upgrade plan, a man named Richard. He was a wealthy, recently divorced businessman she had been lining up. I didn't need to attack him. I just needed to make Sarah seem like a high-risk liability. I knew Richard was in the middle of a contentious divorce. I simply sent an anonymous email to his divorce lawyer's office with a link to Tiffany's live stream of the party, specifically the clip where Sarah talks about her plans to upgrade. I added a simple message. Thought you might find this relevant to the discussion of your client's new associations. By the time Sarah woke up on what she probably thought was just another lazy Saturday, her entire world was rigged to blow. Her credit cards were useless. Her apartment was a ticking time bomb. Her best friend was about to be investigated for fraud, and her escape route was about to be cut off. The first text from her arrived at 11:32 a.m. Hey, where are you? And more importantly, why was my card declined at the coffee shop? I was already miles away, drinking my own coffee, watching my assets deploy. I didn't reply. You don't talk to a crisis, you manage it. Update 2. The first explosions were everything I had planned for, and more. The news story about Tiffany's fake puppy charity broke 2 days later. It was brutal. The reporter I'd tipped off did a fantastic job laying out the entire scam in excruciating detail. Tiffany's name and face were everywhere. The IRS launched an immediate investigation. Her father, a man who valued his family's reputation above all else, completely disowned her. Tiffany's influencer career was not just over, it was a smoking crater. Her reaction was to immediately turn on Sarah. Their text messages, which I was still able to access for a short time, were a masterclass in betrayal. Tiffany blamed Sarah for everything, for bringing me into their lives, for being the one whose boyfriend's credit card was used in the fraud. She threatened to expose Sarah's own involvement to the authorities to save herself. The network of fake friendship had collapsed into a cage match. While this was happening, Sarah was in her own personal hell. The landlord had served her with the papers. She had to either qualify for the $5,000 a month lease on her own, an impossibility, or be out in less than a month. Her frantic calls to me went unanswered. The other friends in her circle were also in disarray. Madison, the investment banker, was called into an emergency meeting with HR. She wasn't fired, but she was put on a strict professional probation and stripped of any client-facing duties. The others, seeing the carnage, scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on. They wanted nothing to do with Sarah or the drama that now surrounded her. The final nail in the coffin was Richard. His divorce lawyer, armed with the video of Sarah's upgrade comment, almost certainly used it to paint a picture of Richard as a reckless man already associating with opportunistic women. I can only imagine the conversation Richard had after that. He didn't just ghost Sarah. He blocked her on every platform and reportedly told a mutual acquaintance that she was the kind of train wreck that could derail a city. In the span of a single week, Sarah had gone from being the queen of her social circle to a complete outcast. She had no money, no apartment, no friends, and no escape plan. She was completely, utterly alone, stranded in the middle of a disaster zone I had engineered with the cold, detached precision of a military operation. She had created a crisis with a single careless sentence. I had simply managed it to its logical conclusion. Final update. It has been a month since my birthday party. For weeks, I had complete radio silence. I continued my life, enjoying the peace and quiet of my new secure apartment. I went to the gym. I caught up on work. I read the book my mother had given me. It was a system restore for my own soul. Then last week she showed up. She wasn't at my new apartment. She was at my office. She had waited in the lobby for hours until I came down at the end of the day. She looked broken. The arrogance was gone. The designer clothes looked worn. She was a refugee from a country of her own making. She launched into the predictable speech. She was sorry. She had made a terrible mistake. She had been insecure and her friends were a bad influence. She loved me. She wanted another chance. I let her finish. I didn't interrupt. When she was finally out of words, I just looked at her. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice quiet but firm. You think this was about my feelings. You think I did all of this because I was mad. She just stared at me, her eyes full of tears. This wasn't about anger, Sarah, I continued. This was about risk assessment. My job is to walk into chaotic, unstable situations and stabilize them. I identify the primary source of the instability, and I neutralize it. For the last year, my personal life has been my most unstable region, and you were the primary source of the chaos. I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture. It was a satellite image of a disaster zone I had worked in a few years ago, a town completely devastated by a mudslide. "This is what I do," I said. "I don't get emotional about the mudslide. I just build a new, safer place for people to live, away from the danger." I put my phone away. "Your comment at the party wasn't an insult. It was a threat assessment." It was the moment I realized the situation was no longer sustainable. You, Tiffany, your entire network, you were the mudslide, a slow-moving disaster destroying everything in your path. "So I didn't just get mad and leave," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "I did my job. I managed the crisis. I evacuated the critical asset, me. I cut off the resources that were feeding the instability, my money, and I dismantled the hostile infrastructure that was making the situation worse, your friends and your pathetic upgrade plan. It wasn't a breakup, Sarah. It was a strategic relocation of assets to a more secure footing." The final, horrifying understanding dawned on her face. She hadn't been dumped by her boyfriend. She had been professionally handled by a man who saw her as nothing more than a problem to be solved. "But what am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. "I have nothing." "That's not true," I said, turning to walk away. "You have a valuable learning experience. You learned that some people aren't just a stopover on your way to an upgrade. Some of us are the ones who decide where the road goes. And your road just led you right back to the beginning." I left her standing on the sidewalk in front of my office building. I heard later that she had to move back in with her parents. She's working in a coffee shop. Tiffany is facing a mountain of legal problems. The rest of her friends have scattered. The entire toxic ecosystem has been wiped clean. My revenge wasn't a crime of passion. It was a work of cold, hard, professional logic. She thought she was playing a social game. She didn't realize I was playing a game of survival. And in my game, I always control the board. At my dad's funeral, my GF whispered to her friend, "Can you believe he's crying like a child? It's giving me the ick." They snickered. I heard every word. The next morning, she found out what real loss felt like. My father was a good man. A quiet man. He taught me how to change the oil in a car, how to frame a wall, and how to treat people with respect, even when they didn't deserve it. He worked as a union carpenter for 40 years, and the calluses on his hands had their own stories to tell. When he passed away 2 weeks ago after a short, brutal fight with cancer, a part of me went with him. I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm his son. I loved him. The funeral was last Wednesday. It was a gray, cold day that matched the emptiness in my chest. I stood in the front row of the small chapel, my sister on one side, my mother on the other. Behind me somewhere was my girlfriend of 3 years, Jenna. She was there for support, or so I thought. I managed to hold it together through the service, through the procession to the cemetery, through the awkward handshakes and sad smiles from people I hadn't seen in years. But as my father's oldest friend, a man named George, stood up to give the eulogy, the dam inside me finally broke. He started telling a story about my dad teaching him how to fish when they were just kids, and the memories came flooding back. Me as a boy on a boat with my dad, the smell of lake water and sunscreen, his patient hands guiding mine as I baited a hook. The tears came. Not loud, sobbing tears. Just silent, hot tears that tracked down my face. It was a raw, helpless grief. In that moment, I was just a son who missed his dad. And that's when I heard it. It was a whisper, right behind me. So close I could feel the warmth of the breath. It was Jenna, talking to her friend and bridesmaid, Maya, who had come with her. "Can you believe he's crying like a child?" Jenna whispered, her voice laced with a kind of baffled disgust. "It's giving me the ick." Then a sound that will be burned into my memory forever, a soft, suppressed snicker from Maya. The world went silent. The grief, the sadness, the entire funeral just vanished. It was replaced by a feeling I had never experienced before. A white-hot, perfectly clear rage that was so intense it felt like ice. The tears on my face felt like they were freezing. I didn't turn around. I didn't move a muscle. I just stood there, staring at my father's casket, and listened to George finish his story. I shook hands, I accepted condolences, I even hugged my mother. But I wasn't really there. My mind was already somewhere else, working with a cold, mechanical precision. She thought my grief, my love for my father was an ick. She found my humanity repulsive. I had been planning on giving this woman my last name, my future, my life. And in the most vulnerable moment I had ever endured, she had shown me exactly who she was. The rest of the day is a blur. I remember the drive to my mom's house for the reception. I remember Jenna trying to hold my hand in the car, and the instinctive way I pulled it away, blaming it on needing to shift gears. I remember her and Maya in a corner of the living room, scrolling through their phones and looking bored while my family shared memories of my dad. She thought she was being subtle. She had no idea I was watching her every move, not as her grieving boyfriend, but as a strategist assessing an enemy. She had just declared war at a funeral, and she didn't even know it. I went home that night to the apartment I owned, the one she had moved into 2 years ago. She came with me, talking about some drama at her work, completely oblivious. She fell asleep around 11. I didn't sleep at all. I just sat in the living room in the dark, and I made a list. The next morning, I was going to teach her the meaning of real loss. Update 1. The morning after my father's funeral was the first morning of the rest of my life. I was up before the sun, moving with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The grief for my dad was still a heavy cloak, but the cold fire of a new resolution burned underneath it. Jenna was still asleep in my bed, in my apartment. I looked at her for a long moment. This stranger who had snickered at my pain. There was no love left. There was nothing. Just a problem to be solved. My first move was silent and digital. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. Jenna had a supplementary credit card on my main account. An emergency card that she used for brunches with Maya, for new clothes, for salon appointments. I logged into my bank's website. 2 clicks. Card canceled. User removed. Done. Next, the joint savings account. We had one, intended for a down payment on a future house. I had contributed 90% of the funds. I did a quick calculation and transferred my entire contribution, plus half of the accrued interest, into my personal checking account. I left her 10%, exactly what she had put in. It amounted to a few $1,000s, a parting gift. Then the car. Jenna drove a nice SUV. It was a year old. It was also legally my nice SUV. The title was in my name, the loan was in my name, the insurance was in my name. I had bought it for her so she would have a reliable vehicle. She made a small payment to me each month, far less than what a real lease would cost. I found the spare key in the junk drawer. I went outside into the cold morning air and drove the car to a dealership a few miles away that specialized in buying used vehicles. I knew the manager. I told him I needed to sell it fast. He said he could have the paperwork and a check ready by the end of the day. I handed him the key and took an Uber back to my apartment. By the time I got back, it was 7:30. Jenna was still asleep. That's when I started on the physical part of the eviction. I went to the hall closet and pulled out a box of heavy-duty black trash bags. If she thought my emotions were garbage, then her possessions could be treated the same way. I was methodical. I started with her closet. The designer dresses, the dozens of pairs of shoes, the handbags that cost more than my first car. I didn't fold them. I just pulled them from the hangers and stuffed them into the bags. Her side of the bathroom was next. The endless bottles of creams and lotions, the expensive makeup, the hair products, all of it swept into a bag. I went through the entire apartment, a silent whirlwind of disposal. Every book, every trinket, every photo of us in a silver frame. I packed it all. By 9 o'clock, there was a mountain of black trash bags piled in the middle of the living room. It was a monument to a dead relationship. That's when she finally woke up. She walked out of the bedroom, yawning, stretching, and stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the scene. What is going on?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. "Are we cleaning?" I didn't turn around. I just kept tying the top of the last bag. "No," I said, my voice calm and even. "You are leaving." She laughed, a nervous, uncertain sound. "What are you talking about, Jake? Is this a joke? It's not funny." I finally turned to face her. I made sure my expression was completely blank. "I'm not joking. I overheard you at my father's funeral yesterday. I heard what you said to Maya. I heard you laugh." The color drained from her face. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine panic in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I took a step closer. "Let me remind you. Can you believe he's crying like a child? It's giving me the ick. Does that ring a bell?" She just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. You stood behind me while I was mourning my father, the man who welcomed you into his home, and you mocked me. I continued, my voice still quiet, but hard as steel. You found my grief for the most important man in my life to be an ick. So I'm doing you a favor. I'm removing the source of your discomfort from your life. Me. And since I am the source of everything else in your life, this apartment, that car, that credit card, all of that is being removed as well. She finally found her voice. You can't do this. This is insane. It was a stupid comment. I was emotional. No, I was emotional, I corrected her. You were cruel. And now you have to deal with the consequences. Your supplementary card has been canceled. The car you were driving is currently being sold. Your belongings are in these bags. You have 1 hour to call your friend Maya and have her come pick you and your things up. Then you will give me the key to this apartment, and you will leave. The tears started then. Big, dramatic crocodile tears. Jake, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I love you. I just looked at her, completely unmoved. You know, Jenna, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, watching you cry right now, it's giving me the ick. The look on her face was worth 1,000 empty apologies. The hour that followed was a masterclass in frantic desperation. She called Maya, screaming into the phone. She tried to bargain with me, to reason with me, to rage at me. I just sat on a kitchen stool drinking a cup of coffee and watched. When Maya arrived, her face a mask of fury, they both started in on me. You are a monster for doing this to her, Maya yelled. Am I? I asked calmly. Or am I just a guy who decided he doesn't want to spend his life with someone who finds his love for his dead father disgusting? They had no answer for that. It took them nearly an hour to haul all 37 trash bags of her life out of my apartment and stuff them into Maya's small SUV. When they were finally done, Jenna stood in the open doorway, her face a mess of tears and makeup. She threw her apartment key on the floor. You will regret this, she hissed. No, Jenna, I said, looking her dead in the eye. You already do. Then I closed the door and locked it. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. It wasn't the empty silence of loss. It was the clean, quiet silence of freedom. Update 2. The week after the eviction, as I've come to think of it, was a strange one. I was dealing with the logistics of my father's estate, which was a heavy but necessary task. It kept my mind busy. Every form I filled out, every account I closed, felt like an act of honoring him. And every night, I would come home to my quiet, Jenna-free apartment and feel a sense of profound relief. I had expected a counterattack, and it didn't take long to arrive. The initial assault was digital, a barrage of texts and calls from blocked numbers, voicemails from Jenna, alternating between hysterical sobbing and venomous rage, messages from Maya, calling me an unstable psycho who needed serious help. I deleted them all without listening to them fully. Then, the narrative began to form. They launched a coordinated smear campaign among our mutual friends. The story they were spinning was a work of fiction. Apparently, I had suffered a complete mental breakdown due to my father's death. In my grief-stricken, unstable state, I had a psychotic episode and violently threw the loving, supportive Jenna out onto the street for no reason at all. They were worried about me. They were scared of what I might do next. It was a clever strategy. It painted me as the villain and her as the martyred saint who had endured my instability. A few of our mutual friends, the ones who were more her friends than mine, bought it completely. I got a few concerned yet accusatory text messages. Dude, are you okay? Heard you went off the deep end. Kicking Jenna out was not cool. I knew I couldn't let this narrative take root. I had to fight back, but not on their terms. I wasn't going to get into a public shouting match. My revenge needed to be like a sniper shot, one clean, precise action that would end the war. I remembered something from the funeral. As I was standing there, crying, my cousin Sarah was standing just a few feet away. She had come over and given me a hug right after George's eulogy. She was closer to Jenna and Maya than I was. There was a chance she had heard it too. I called her. I didn't beat around the bush. Sarah, I need to ask you something important. At Dad's funeral, when George was speaking, I was pretty broken up. I know you were standing near me. Did you happen to overhear Jenna say anything? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, Jake, she said, her voice full of pity. I didn't want to be the one to tell you. I heard it all. I couldn't believe it. I told Mom about it on the way home. We were disgusted. Bingo. I had a witness. And not just any witness, a member of my own family. My next call was to our one key mutual friend, a guy named Mark, who was the social hub of our group. If you wanted a story to spread, you told Mark. Mark, I said, I know you're hearing a lot of crazy stories right now. I just want to tell you the truth. Once, so you have it. At my dad's funeral, while I was crying during the eulogy, Jenna leaned over to Maya and said, Can you believe he's crying like a child? It's giving me the ick. My cousin Sarah was standing right there and heard it too. That is why she is no longer in my life. That is the whole story. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. The vague story of my breakdown versus a direct, shocking quote corroborated by a witness. There was no contest. She said that? He finally asked, his voice full of disbelief. At a funeral? Yes, I said. That's who she is. It took less than 48 hours for the truth to dismantle their web of lies. The story of what Jenna said and where she said it was so monstrous, so indefensible, that it completely annihilated her victim narrative. The concerned texts I was getting turned into messages of support. A few people even sent me apologies for doubting me. Jenna and Maya were exposed for the callous, cruel people they were. The desperation from Jenna's end escalated. A few days later, I got a frantic call from the building manager of my apartment complex. Apparently, Jenna had shown up with a locksmith, claiming she was a legal resident who had been illegally locked out. Thankfully, I had already sent him an email the week before, informing him that she was no longer living with me and was not on the lease. He had denied the locksmith entry and threatened to call the police if she didn't leave the property. Her attempt to publicly humiliate me and force her way back in had failed spectacularly. The final pathetic attempt came in the form of a legal-looking letter. It was from a cheap letter-for-hire law office. It was a demand for financial restitution. It claimed she was entitled to half the value of the SUV, a cash settlement for emotional distress, and 3 months of spousal support to help her get back on her feet. It was a joke, but a joke that needed to be answered. I forwarded it to my family's lawyer, the same one who was handling my father's estate. His response was a work of art. It was a single page. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that Jenna had no legal claim to any of my assets. It reminded her that she was a guest in my home, not a legal tenant. It then included a formal invoice for $1,500, the cost of her portion of the rent and utilities for the final month she lived in my apartment, which she had not paid. The letter concluded by saying that we would be happy to waive the invoice in exchange for her ceasing all further contact. But if she chose to pursue her baseless legal claims, we would aggressively countersue for that amount, plus all associated legal fees. The silence that followed was absolute. The war was over. I had won. Final update. It's been 6 months. The leaves have turned, fallen, and the first snow is on the ground. The sharp edges of the grief for my father have softened, replaced by a warm, enduring sense of his presence in my life. The drama with Jenna feels like it happened to someone else in another lifetime. Life, as it turns out, goes on, and it gets better. So much better. I never heard from Jenna or her lawyer again after that final letter. The invoice was, unsurprisingly, never paid. But the harassment stopped. That was payment enough. I heard about her life in bits and pieces, through the grapevine of old mutual friends. Her downfall was not swift and dramatic. It was a slow, quiet, and pathetic collapse. After wearing out her welcome on Maya's couch in less than a month, she had no choice but to move back in with her parents. The independent, sophisticated life she had built for herself was revealed to be a fragile facade, held up entirely by my income and my stability. She had to get a job, a low-level administrative position that paid a fraction of what she was used to spending on a single shopping trip. The new SUV was gone, replaced by an old, beat-up sedan her parents gave her. The brunches, the salons, the designer clothes, all gone. Her social life withered. Maya and her other friends, the ones who enabled her cruelty, slowly drifted away. They were attracted to the lifestyle she had with me. When the lifestyle disappeared, so did they. The irony is almost poetic. The woman who found real emotion icky is now living a life devoid of any real joy or substance. She is trapped in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, a prisoner of the superficial values she held so dear. Her life is, by her own definition, one giant ick. As for me, I've been rebuilding. I sold my apartment in the city and bought a small house with a bit of land, the kind of place my dad always dreamed of having. I've been spending my weekends working on it, getting my hands dirty, building something real and lasting. My cousin Sarah and I have become closer than ever. My family, my real family, has been my rock. I've also started a foundation in my father's name. It provides scholarships for young people who want to go into the skilled trades like carpentry. It's a way of honoring his legacy, of turning my loss into something positive for others. It's the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. I saw Jenna once, a few weeks ago. I was at a home improvement store loading bags of soil into the back of my truck. She was pulling into the parking lot in her old sedan. Our eyes met for a brief second through her windshield. I saw a flicker of something in her face, shock, shame, maybe even regret. She quickly looked away and drove to the far end of the parking lot. I didn't feel a thing. No anger, no sadness, not even pity. It was like looking at a stranger. The hold she had on me was completely gone. She was just a person I used to know, a footnote in a chapter of my life that was now closed. The ultimate revenge wasn't in the canceled card or the repossessed car. It wasn't in the social humiliation or the legal threats. The ultimate revenge was my own peace. It was in discovering that the life she tried to tear down was just a house, and I was the foundation. I could rebuild, stronger and better than before. She mocked me for crying at my father's funeral. She saw my love as a weakness, but she was wrong. That love, that grief, was a sign of my humanity. It was the source of my strength. And in the end, it was the thing that saved me from a life with someone who would never understand what it means to truly lose something, because she never truly valued anything. She lost me, but I gained myself back. And that's a trade I'd make every single time.